My name is Stephen Eichler. I'm walking through a Palo Alto neighborhood called Greenmeadow. My grandfather, Joseph Eichler, built this neighborhood 40 years ago. This series celebrates Greenmeadow, still vital after 40 years. This is the third in a series of 5 programs about Greenmeadow. In this program, we'll look at the architecture of the Eichler homes here. But first, we look at where Greenmeadow is located and how the neighborhood is organized.
I would tell them that it's in the southern part of Palo Alto, almost out of Palo Alto, almost over in the Mountain View, and that it's located across from a high school that used to be, but is no longer a high school. And it's about a couple of miles, not even a couple of miles, about a mile from the railroad tracks. Other than that, I don't know. Generally, if I tell people, I say it's between San Antonio and Charleston, and it's between Alma and Middlefield.
But there's some other subdivisions in there, and the way Greenmeadow developed was that Greenmeadow 1 is where we are, and it strings itself out. Along behind Cubberley High School is our common boundary there. Then Greenmeadow 2 sort of went from the backyards of this side of Parkside, and then that was developed at a later time and became Greenmeadow 2. There's Fern Street that comes in there where there are some different kinds of houses, and that was all that was left at that time, and Eichler got a portion of that and built some of the later designs, some of the ones that have the atriums. And that's, some years later, became Greenmeadow 3.
Hi, I'm Stephen Eichler, and this is Casey and Mark Marcinick, who are living in Greenmeadow. Why are you living in an Eichler home in Greenmeadow?
When our son was born, we spent several years looking for a house outside of the city, in the suburbs. And we had seen all these neighborhoods with modern houses, and that's really what we wanted, was to live in a modern house, in modern architecture. And it turns out that we were able to buy this house mostly because it had been abandoned and pretty much destroyed. It was a real fixer-upper. And it just turned out that it was in Greenmeadow, which we didn't know anything about the neighborhood when we bought the house, but of course it was wonderful to find out. So we've been fixing the house up for the last 3 years.
So what are you doing in remodeling this house? What are you concentrating on?
Well, we had to really replace every finish in the house. So we're trying to, we thought about, doing a real dedicated restoration where we put the mahogany paneling back and all that. And what we're trying to do instead is some of our own design ideas. The house is now more of a custom architectural home within the shell of the Eichler Builder tract home.
So as two architects, do you have, what are some of the elements that you are trying to accomplish?
Well, there's a sort of spirit of modern design in these houses. The original architect was interested in showing the structure of the house, how it's built. You have beams that show, how they carry the roof, and there's a definite concept to unite inside and outside spaces. So there's all kinds of sort of conceptual things that we're trying to illuminate by painting the beams a different color than the ceiling. You can sort of sense the structure of the building. The house itself is zoned, which was something new for the 50s, where you have a separate bedroom wing and a sort of utility wing, and then a sort of open living, entertaining wing, which is connected to the outside entertaining, living spaces. So we're sort of keeping all those sort of by color and different textures, again, sort of illustrating that they're different, separate things, and that's how these buildings are conceived.
As architects, what is it about Eichler's that appealed to you?
As we started to research it, we saw that it was a major, very talented architect had designed this, and that through time, people have sort of forgotten the significance of these houses. And just as sort of socially we're sort of reevaluating 50s values and 60s values now, people are also reevaluating what 50s architecture, modern design is all about. So in some ways we sort of wanted to educate or to illustrate what we had found out about these houses. So if you see different colors, and sometimes they're exaggerated, so we're trying to show the different elements and parts and how things were constructed. Because these houses are unique in that people thought about those things. There's definitely an architectural concept and a social and space planning concept in these houses.
All the houses in Greenmeadow have this particular design concept where the exterior wall finish comes through and is a part of the living room. It's actually the exterior of the bedroom wing. And they emphasize this by putting the glass, the side light of the door goes right up to that wall, and the glass in the living room goes up to the wall on the other side so that you see the whole wall from front to back. And most people actually have that painted, the exterior wall color, which we do too, of course, but...
What's the idea?
Yeah, I mean, it's very clear.
It's one of the devices
concepts.
where you can connect your interior and exterior spaces, which again, that's one of the concepts of sort of the California living, of that you could have a close relationship to your exterior.
The reason we painted the white stripes and the dark background is it's just sort of a minor detail, but the architect Quincy Jones was very interested in the corrugated textures of wood paneling and the wood ceiling, and that emphasizes that. And it was actually very easy to do, so.
I mean, the wood is a custom milled redwood. It's not something stock. And one thing you'll start seeing if you study these houses compared to like a Frank Lloyd Wright house is the verticals are expressed.
A lot of new homes today have this great room concept where you have the kitchen and part of the family room, and everybody sort of mingles in with the cook and all that. But in the 50s, it was pretty unusual for Eichler homes to do this, and they had, just a partial wall between the kitchen and the living room, and then it opened out to what they used to call the hanging coffin, the overhead cabinet, and the table for people to actually sit in the kitchen and eat. So we've kept that concept because obviously it still works today, better than ever. We have the kitchen open to the living room, and we have our table, part of the kitchen, part in its own little dining area. The multi-purpose room is really living up to its name because my office is in there, and it's also the TV watching room, and the kids play in there. it's perfectly set up. I mean, it's kind of funny that in the 50s, you wouldn't have imagined somebody staying at home really and working in an office, but it's really designed for that. I can keep an eye on the kids in the yard and out here. And
It's exactly like the sales brochures would say. You can keep an eye on the kids while you're, sewing. But now Casey's has practicing architecture in the room and can keep track of the kids in the courtyard.
What are some of the things that you did in the multipurpose room to sort of echo the architectural features of the house?
Again, one of the devices where the outside wall becomes a fence as it runs out through the house. In many Eichlers in Greenmeadow, it's a concrete wall. We weren't lucky enough to have the concrete wall, so we just sort of made our wood wall look exactly like the fence. We had some custom milled redwood.
we put the siding on
fence.
the inside so that it looks like the outside, just like the concrete block. And we added a narrow window there so that you can see the fence going past the house, just like you see the
Just like the
wall
front
here.
door, light by the front door.
When we redid the kitchen, we took out this partial height partition that had been here, and so the posts were then exposed, holding up the beam, which is holding up these other beams. And so we just clad them in redwood so that they look a little more finished and exposed them.
It's necessary in this type of style to emphasize different components. So you have to sort of turn up contrast levels. Our beams are black. The ceiling, we'd love to have the original ceiling, but it was already painted. But we still have the contrast, so it's clear to see that. Same with the floor plane. We wanted a material that was natural, but gave some sort of contrast to everything else. And we did some practical things. We have slate right by the fireplace, which takes care of the hearth function, but we continue it along the entire wall so that if you wash the windows, the wood floor isn't getting wet. It's also by the sliding glass doors, so you walk onto tile instead of some more wood surface. Actually, Thomas Church, who was a landscape architect, used the same device on the outside of the houses. Generally, you'd run concrete around all the windows so that you could wash the windows without stepping on plants and things like that. So we've done it on the inside as well.
Another device we found, which makes the small bedrooms appear larger, is to do the walls in different colors and different textures. When we painted the entire room white, because we were priming it, it just shrank, it's like you were in a little box. But if you make one wall a bright accent color and another wall the wood paneling, and then you have the windows on the other wall, it sort of breaks the box, and the room feels more comfortable that way.
If you were to build your own house, what elements out of an Eichler home would you take with you?
Well, I would definitely take the open plan. Maybe this is getting off the point, but my father's an architect, and so I grew up in a house that was designed in 1958, and it was modern and it was very open, and so it's hard for me to imagine really living in a different kind of house.
Well, I definitely just the expression of structural elements where everything isn't hidden and sort of phony looking. I mean, it's very pleasant to see how the space is being held up.
It's educational for the kids, too. Our son has known what beams and columns were since he was 3 years old.
As in many good ideas that sort of are knocked off later on by people that don't understand it, Greenmeadow is really pretty early for having these cul-de-sacs, and they sort of went bad later in the 70s. But cul-de-sacs are simply to keep people from driving through your development really quickly. We know now that Professorville is trying to put these barriers all through to keep people from barreling through. So that's sort of a built-in feature. But it also creates a certain isolation. Or if you happen to be in a cul-de-sac that's right next to a school, you'd have to go all the way out your street and down and around just to get to the school. It's really next to you. But they had thought about that in here. Every place where the cul-de-sac would not give you a direct link to something, you'll see that they've created a pathway through 2 yards, 2 houses, to go over Adobe Creek, to go to the elementary schools, which are, just sort of one big block away. They've cut a road, and to Coverly, they've cut a walkway, and some of the neighbors complain that there's a walkway between their 2 fences, but it's what makes this this plan work. Have all the privacy, but when you need to, you can get through to the shopping and schools and whatever.
Without getting in your car.
Without getting in your car. One of the aspects of modern architecture was, concepts as form follows function, and what's unique about these houses is it was sort of an early rethinking of the house, and that's why they look different than the house. At the same time, it was just sort of a copy of a previous design. This is a house that tried to incorporate this new feature in American life, which was the car. So instead of putting it sort of in a little shed in the back of the alley or something like that, there was a conscious attempt to do a good-looking garage. And they did it by having it in the front of the house, where it's the most useful. And they did it by using rolling doors that have a siding on them that matches the rest of the house. So it's basically integrated into the entire facade. So we did, and some people were saying that they don't work very well, and it's just the simplest little adjustments. They're all adjustable, the tracks and the doors themselves, to right them, or settling has occurred through the ages, and then I just put some oil on them, and we had very easily to operate doors that aren't a.
And some people, we've known people who've actually put automatic door openers that slide them back and forth.
That's my ultimate goal. I think
Yeah,
that would be
someday.
pure luxury.
But this concept of having the garage, the double garage in the front of the house, really took off all over America, suburbia. But when they use those paneled colonial type doors,
It's not appropriate for.
it's not. It doesn't fit the scale of the house.
Well, it's been called the idiom of the 50s, and in my architectural career, that's what it was. I was part of the 50s movement in architecture, and it was a lot of people claim that it's based a lot on Frank Lloyd Wright, but it's less on Wright than it is in some of the later architects like Richard Neutra. Richard Neutra is the one who sort of pioneered the idea that a house should not make a barrier between the inside and the outside. And that was the essence of his architecture, was excuse me, to blend the inside and the outside with certain details. And these houses, well, it's first of all the post and beam idea, but then it's the idea of minimizing the transition from inside to outside. Yes, as far as the architectural character of the Eichler house is concerned, it not only was faithful to the post and beam idiom of construction, and it used the large areas of glass oriented to the sun, as I talked about when we talked about first seeing this house. There are other details. Well, they're sort of characteristics of the Eichler design, in that where a piece of glass meets a wall, there's very little return. It minimizes the framing aspect of the glass. It lets the glass finish right against a piece of material, so that true to the principles laid down by Schindler and Neutra and those architects, and carried on by those of us who worked in the idiom of the 50s. When we inherited some furniture, one of them was a corner cupboard from my parental home and parents' home in Tennessee, or grandparents' home in Tennessee. It's a corner cupboard. The design of the house is such that there was no corner. There are no corners in an Eichler house. It's an open plan, very few doors, and so we had to do a little remodeling and create a corner to put the corner cupboard. I think everybody has remodeled the kitchen of their Eichler. The original concept was minimum in cost. There was a color or a paint called Zolatone, and they built the cabinets as cheaply as possible and then sprayed them with Zolatone, which was a kind of a dark background color with streaks of yellow and red and various things in it. And I think as people lived with the houses, that was the first thing to go, was the kitchen. And then there was a table in this version, and in nearly all of them, there was a table that extended out and served as the separation between the living room and the kitchen and became the dining room. So there were very few dining areas, but there was this table. And then over that was an extension of the upper cabinets of the kitchen. And it became known as the flying coffin. And nearly everyone got rid of that because it was, you bumped your head on it when you got up from the table.
I'll always admire Joe Eichler for having brought quality modern architecture to the masses, and I still feel like in 1994 I'm benefiting from that by being able to live in a contemporary house designed by Quincy Jones at a price that's still, relatively speaking, affordable.
We like the openness. We like as you see, the open view, a great deal of glass. So we were pretty well convinced of the merit of this type of architecture from long standing.
But I do like the openness, and when I go into a conventional home now, I feel shut in, closed in. I'm not sure I could live in one after all this glass, and one room flowing into another.
There's a lot of parallels you can make between the architecture, which is sort of an architecture structure, and a social structure. When we first moved in, it was really incredible that neighbors would come over, and we were wondering why they're coming over and talking to us, and it was sort of different than what we had seen in San Francisco. And it's just like the architecture is connected to its environment and open to its environment, so there seems to be a social structure that's also open. It's almost like becoming a member of a club when you move here, because you immediately have access to 270 people.
In the next program in this series about Greenmeadow, we'll look at the Greenmeadow Community Association. This is Stephen Eichler. I hope you'll join me then.